Good morning. I'm Will Sager, and I want to welcome you to the first of our summer series, Recycling Revisited. We're taking a look at what we can expect as we adapt to this new post-normal or new normal post-COVID. We have got a series lined up. The dates are there on the screen. Today, we're going to get started looking at the paper sector of the recycling industry. As during COVID, we've all got used to working online with just some of our housekeeping details. This full recording of this session will be available and on our website at the link you see there, and there'll be navigation on our website by Friday. We want to know that everybody is muted, and you can use the little box control panel that you've got showing there on the side of your screen to put into the question section, and the moderator, our Susan Robinson from Waste Management, will be directing your questions to the panelists. If you should have any audio issues, you do have a call-in number in your calendar item that you can go directly and just have a phone call. I want to thank our SERDC sponsors that make all of our work possible. SERDC's mission is to unite government and industry to promote sustainable recycling. Full statements there on the screen. We are working across the Southeast and in times beyond to improve the collection of materials and that are available, or improve the quantity and quality of materials that are available for manufacturing. With that, I would like to we have two brief messages from ISRI and the SheNext. These are two that have stepped up and have made this series possible, especially so that we were able to offer free registration to all of you. The cost incurred here were by these, and we have a short message from them. Following that, Susan Robinson will start our session. Thank you.
Hello. I'm Robin Weiner, the president of ISRI. ISRI is very proud to partner with SERDC and others participating in this webinar series to showcase how the recycling industry has adapted to meet numerous unexpected global challenges while continuing to provide essential infrastructure and products needed in our everyday lives. ISRI looks forward to working with each of you to continue advancing the recycling industry. Thank you.
Hello, I'm hoping you can see me. This is Susan Robinson with Waste Management. Thank you to SERDC, and thank you so much to our sponsors today for sponsoring this great webinar series. And we're just thrilled to have today Chaz Miller, Brian Hawkinson, and Dave Kawine to really give us an update as to what's going on in the paper world right now. Over the last 3 years, we've kind of seen the markets globally constrict, and we've kind of used some terms and heard about some of the hard times. And it's time to really talk about what's happening in 2021 and what's some of the good news that's going on out there. Chaz has been keeping track of some of the mills that have been coming online and have announcements to come online. We're going to hear from Brian from the AF&PA. They've just put out a great set of guidelines on recyclability. And then Dave, they've just opened up a new mill. And it's just an exciting time with a lot going on. I know for us as a company, we are extremely optimistic and excited about the future. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Chaz Miller. He is it's funny, his resume or his bio says that he's retired. Well, quite frankly, I disagree with that. The man is as busy as he ever has been and has been really keeping tabs on what's going on in the world. And we're so lucky to benefit from the research that he does and his willingness to really share with us his vast knowledge over 4 decades in the industry. He started out with EPA. He's been with the Glass Packaging Institute and NWNRA. And he's an ex officio board member for the Northeast Recycling Council and is a recipient of the National Recycling Coalition's Lifetime Achievement Award. So we're thrilled to have Chaz here. I'll go ahead and turn it over to you.
Thank you, Susan, and I'm delighted to be here and do this webinar. I'll be looking at paper markets, paper recycling markets, how they've changed and where they're going. I'll look at export and domestic markets, current prices in the Southeast, and I'm going to make some predictions. So let's start with a quick background on paper. Paper's so important to recycling programs. It's 2/3 of what is collected in the United States for recycling. Commercial recycling is mostly old corrugated containers, those boxes you see in that picture. Residential recycling is about 50 to 65% old corrugated container, or OCC, and mixed paper, also known as RMP. And what this means is that paper revenue is absolutely crucial to a program's success. Now, in the last 20 years, generation of paper has gone down by about 20 million tons in this country. And virtually all of that decline has been in printed paper as newspapers and magazines have sort of gone away. Packaging grades of paper are now more than half of the paper products produced in this country. And other grades, tissue, towels, et cetera, tend to grow as the population grows. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So how has the pandemic impacted paper? Very simple. I expected that all of us have increased our use of online shopping over the last 12 months. E-commerce is now 16% of retail sales. That is almost a 1/3 increase from a year ago. And that pandemic impact on recycling has been very profound. With so many businesses closed, there's been less quantity and less quality of OCC from businesses. And that has not been offset by the increase in e-commerce boxes that are generated residentially. And frankly, residential quality is simply not as good. So next slide, please. Let's focus on markets. Next slide, please. Let's focus on markets, starting with exports. Over the last 2 decades, exports have exploded. That is over. In 2020, we only exported about 16 million tons. That's down 5 million tons from just 2 years before, largely due to the China ban, but also increased domestic demand. But it's worth noting, and this slide became out of date yesterday when new data was released and published. In the first 3 months of 2021, 4.3 million tons of paper were exported. India, Mexico, and Vietnam get a little bit more than half of the exports. And that tonnage is significant because if we stay at that same level of paper export recycling, we will actually do more exports in 2021 than we did in 2020. Next slide, please. And there are some barriers to export of papers. Shortages in trucks to get bales to docks, shortages in shipping containers, shortages in what are called sailings or bookings. And it's very hard to predict how long those barriers are going to last. Because some of those, in particular, the driver issue and the shortage of trucks, that's been a growing problem in the trucking industry for decades. But now let's look at some increases in domestic capacity for recycled paper. Next slide, please. This is a picture, I love this picture. It's a picture of a crew of workers at Green Bay Recycling, packaging, celebrating the production of the first reel of paper from their brand new mill. I'm going to leave it to my fellow panelists to tell you more, however, about this plant. But it is one of many increases in domestic demand for recycled paper. Next slide, please. And this is the work we've been doing at the Northeast Recycling Council, tracking this increased capacity for recycled paper in North America. 30 announced capacity expansions since 2017. Now, conversions mean you're changing a printing paper to a packaging machine. Expansions mean you're expanding existing packaging paper capacity at a mill. And new mills is simply just that. It's new mills announced since 2017. Virtually all of these mills use OCC. At least 7 use residential mixed paper as a major input. 5 of them will make recycled paper pulp. 1 is going to be using cartons as its input, and 1 is going to be using food contained paper as its input. If all of these mills are built, that's about 5 to 7 million tons of new capacity. However, they will not all be built because that is simply more capacity than is needed to make linerboard in this country. Next slide, please. And this is our status right now. 15 of the mills have completed their projects. Virtually all of those are expansions, but not completely. In terms of OCC use, 12 OCC conversions or expansions have been completed. I call them OCC conversions or expansions because that's the raw recycled paper input. 2 new facilities that are going to rely to a considerable extent on mixed paper have just opened. 3 of the recycled fiber pulp facilities have been completed, and those are also part of the conversions because they're all at facilities that are also converting. And the food contaminated paper facility is opened. That's about 3 million new tons of capacity now. Next slide, please. Let's look at prices. Now, there is a slight typo in this. That should be May 17, 2021. The data is from recyclingmarkets.net. Data is also published by Resource Recycling Magazine. This is the Southeast average. I did 2 years ago because that was when we were really at the bottom. There was a weird little spike last year at this time. OCC is more than doubled, more than doubled. Residential mixed paper is even more than that, but it's worth noting 2 things. First of all, the spread between OCC and residential mixed paper in the Southeast is actually greater now than it was 2 years ago. The second thing is that OCC prices in the OCC run ahead of the national average. Residential mixed prices in the Southeast tend to run a little bit behind. And you can find on spot markets some very aggressive pricing. Next slide, please. This is a little chart I put together originally for the Carolina Recycling Association a couple of weeks ago. It looks at the price for OCC only in the last issued price in the month of April for the 11 years, 2011 to 2021. OCC prices reached their local and national peak in 2011, and that was the height of exports to China. The Chinese started to slowly get out of the export market. In 2013, you had the green fence, prices went down even more. And then in 2016, prices shot up dramatically as the mills, in 2017, as the mills started hoarding paper in anticipation of the ban. And then they declined. Next slide, please. Let's make some predictions. But I got some good news, but I don't know everything. And the last time I spoke to a real audience, not a virtual audience, if you will, was in Connecticut at the end of January in 2020. I made some modest predictions that I thought that paper prices were going to increase, but I never used the word pandemic in that presentation. My predictions are based on a belief that we're going to be back to normalcy by fall, that the economy will remain strong, that some previous trends, such as the decline in printed paper, will increase, will just continue. But we're a social species. We're raring to be out and about. But what black swan, if you will, is out there? We still don't know how the pandemic is going to play out. And in particular, you look at India, the biggest importer of our recycled paper, and they're having some very serious problems with the pandemic right now. Is that going to have a worse impact on their mills? Next slide, please. So these are my predictions. Prices are rising and they're going to stay that way throughout this year. You know, it is so nice to do a presentation on markets for recyclables and not be Donnie Downer, because for the last 3 years or so, I have just been so, you know, what can you say about bad markets? Hey, the price of virgin pulp is rising. The price of OCC and RMP are rising. Linerboard companies are increasing prices, which is a very good sign. They're able to pass those higher raw material prices on. In fact, they're already predicting in their first quarter annual reports a $30 per ton increase for OCC this year. Their production is up. Recycling and hauling companies are reporting higher recycling revenues. They're reporting what are called tailwinds, not headwinds. The key question, what will happen to retail stores versus e-commerce over the next year or two? It's worth noting that in the last 2 quarters of last year, e-commerce softened a little bit as a percentage of overall retail sales. Stores were reopening. I don't think e-commerce is going to drop. I question how much it will rise as stores reopen completely. Next slide, please. I'm a big believer in what I call Goldilocks markets. Not too hot, not too cold. Markets that work for buyers and for sellers and don't lead to theft at the curb or at the dock. I think we're getting close to that for OCC and RMP. We're not there yet, but I think we're getting close to that. And I think it's worth noting that let's not make a mess of this. Remember, you know, always be prepared for down markets. Always remember that markets come and go, but quality is eternal. And I thank you for your time. I thank you for your look forward to your questions, and copies of my slide are available. Thank you, Susan.
That was excellent, Chaz. Thank you so much. And I agree with you. It is just so delightful and nice to be able to hear some good news. And thank you for the research you've done and then sharing that with us. Next, we're going to hear from Brian Hawkinson, who's the Executive Director of Recovered Fiber at the American Forest and Paper Association. I'm thrilled to have Brian here today. I read their guidelines a couple of times, and they just newly out, I believe, this spring. And they are just kind of, they were a missing piece for me, that, you know, that providing information that I think is really useful, practical. So really looking forward to that. Brian manages issues and programs that promote increased paper recycling and access to recovered fiber for use in manufacturing new pulp, paper, and paperboard. He's got a long history in the industry, and he's currently on the board of directors for the Recycling Partnership and a past member of the board of directors of the National Recycling Coalition. Brian, it's all yours, and thank you very much for being here today.
Thanks, Susan. Appreciate the chance to be here and talk with you a little bit about a new resource for members of the paper packaging manufacturing supply chain, our design guidance for recyclability. Susan mentioned that it was launched in the spring. It was early March, and it's the result of about a year-long process that we engaged in with our members, with other stakeholders in the industry. And we did it because we recognized that there was increased interest among consumer products companies to provide more recyclable packaging. So we took that opportunity to bring clarity to how paper-based packaging gets recycled in paper mills and how various non-fiber elements affect recyclability. The guidance is not mandatory, it's not an industry standard, rather it's a new tool for designers who are really faced with complex decisions to balance product design, performance, and recyclability in a way that makes an attractive and functional package. And hopefully this will be one resource to help them make those decisions. You can see the table of contents here. The design guidance presents research-based findings from 86 mills in the US and Canada that help bring some clarity around what's easier to recycle and what can be recycling challenges in terms of different kinds of paper-based packaging. You know, I'll go through some of the highlights on the content. You can see here the layout for the report, introduction, methodology, thanks, section on how paper recycling works, and then we get into some high-level looks at ease of recyclability, for those non-fiber elements attached or applied to different kinds of paper-based packaging. Then we do drill downs on specific kinds of packaging, and the report ends with different appendices that give more detailed information on different elements of the issue. When you get into this, hopefully you've had a chance, some of you, to look at it. When you do, one of the really nice features in this is that it's an interactive PDF, so you can click on links and take you to different parts of the report without having to spend a lot of time scrolling. So let's go to the next slide, please. Yeah, I'd mentioned that the report opens up with a section on how paper recycling works. We do that over about a 4-slide or 4-page section. We've gotten a lot of good feedback on this. It's helpful for folks who are not steeped in paper manufacturing to give you an idea about what the process is that happens in mills when paper-based packaging gets turned into new paper or paperboard. We go to the next slide. We have a section in here that looks at ease of recyclability for each of the different kinds of non-fiber elements that are either attached or applied to 7 major kinds of paper-based packaging. The beauty of this part is that at a glance, you can see which of those non-fiber elements make each kind of packaging either more easily recycled. In other words, they don't have a negative or a bad impact on recyclability. Those are identified by the green dots. The gray dots indicate that in the research, 33% or more of the mills told us that this is a recycling challenge. Now, that doesn't mean that it makes it not recyclable, but it means that it may present some challenges to the recyclability of that kind of a package. And then the hollow dots indicate that that kind of a non-fiber element typically does not appear on the kind of packaging that it's marked on. So you can see, for example, wax coatings are identified as being on corrugated packaging, but not on any of the other major types. Can we go to the next slide? Thanks. This is one of the sections where we drill down on each of those 7 major kinds of paper-based packaging. In the panel on the left is a description of what that kind of packaging is and how it is typically used in the marketplace. And then in the center, we have boxes that identify which of the non-fiber elements that are either attached or applied to that kind of package. In this case, recycled or unbleached boxboard cartons are easier to recycle, in which can present recycling challenges to some of the mills. And again, being a recycling challenge doesn't make it not recyclable. Every one of the combinations of non-fiber element attached to one of the 7 types of packaging is more easily recycled in some of the mills in the research that we did. But this gives you a sense for what the drill down looks like and how each of those non-fiber elements affect recyclability for that kind of packaging. We go to the next slide. Yeah, and this is sort of a cascade of the different pages that show you that there is another one of these drill down elements for each of the different kinds of paper-based packaging in the design guidance. There is also a section with different appendices that provide descriptions or definitions of what each one of the non-fiber elements are, provides definitions of recyclability, some more in-depth information provided by associations that represent some of the non-fiber element manufacturers, and a glossary in there as well. Can we go to the next slide? AF&PA's communications team has done a terrific job getting the word out about the design guidance. We've gotten good coverage in a lot of industry publications and some that are not necessarily within the industry, like Fast Company. There will be an article coming out in the June issue of Resource Recycling magazine, also on the design guidance. Here's the URL. If you haven't had a chance to download it and spend some time going through it, I encourage you to do that. It's at the AF&PA website, pardon me. And of course, I'm always available for any questions that you all have about the design guidance, about its use, or how it may be able to help you. And that's it for the prepared comments, Susan.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Brian. I really appreciate this. I think, one of my takeaways from that document was the fact that even in the world of paper, which we've been recycling for so long, there is still variability. And really I think this set of guidelines really help kind of give a little bit and bring some sense to that variability. So thank you very much. I appreciate it. All right, next we have on our agenda, our schedule, Dave Kawine, who is with Green Bay Packaging. I'm thrilled to have Dave here today. He's been with Green Bay since 1976 as a forester. His experience includes 9 years as Vice President and General Manager of Green Bay's Fiber Resource Division and 15 years as Vice President and General Manager of Green Bay's Pinecrest Lumber Division. I love this. I have never read any but a bio that starts this with this great timber background. I come from timber country, so I love this. David has 13 years of paper mill experience at Green Bay's Arkansas Craft Division and has been Vice President of Secondary Fiber Procurement since 2017, managing OCC procurement for their linerboard mills. Thank you so much for being here today. I'm just so looking forward to hearing more about the company and the mill. So turn it over to you, Dave.
Thank you, Susan. I appreciate that introduction. In Green Bay, they think of me as a jack of all trades, master of none. The slide here shows a little bit about what we are. It's our two paper mills. The one with the one in the top right is our new Green Bay mill. The center picture is also at that new mill. And then the bottom right is a picture of our Arkansas Craft paper mill. Linerboard rolls and OCC. It's kind of a summary of what our mills do, the incoming, what we produce, and then a snapshot of our two mills. A little bit about Green Bay Packaging. In 1926, George Kress began making boxes in his garage under the name Green Bay Box Company. By 1933, he ended that operation and he named it Green Bay Packaging. Green Bay is a family-owned, vertically integrated manufacturing company consisting of corrugated shipping container plants, folding carton facility, recycled and virgin containerboard mills, timberlands, a paper setting operation, specialty converting operations, and a sawmill facility. We're headquartered in Green Bay, Wisconsin. In March of this year, we commissioned a new paper mill in Green Bay, replacing an older mill that had started up in 1948. Our new mill incorporates new technology benefiting yield and environmental concerns. This mill also produces linerboard and corrugated medium in the full spectrum of basis weights using 100% post-consumer recycled fiber, OCC, and mixed paper. We partner with customers to optimize the collection of old corrugated containers recovered in their recycling processes. In 2019, this diverted 2.25 million cubic yards of solid waste away from landfills. That effort regenerates OCC with fewer resources while reducing the carbon footprint. This year, we project that our Green Bay mill will use about 500,000 tons of OCC and mixed paper, while our Arkansas Craft mill, located at Morrilton, Arkansas, will consume about 300,000 tons of OCC. We promote sustainability through resource conservation, pollution prevention, recycling, responsible forestry, energy conservation, waste reduction, and a closed loop in our water system. Our new Green Bay mill incorporates reduced greenhouse gas emissions reductions primarily, and that's about 90% reductions, primarily because we shut down a coal-fired boiler and have switched to a cleaner natural gas fuel for the mill. We also have a first of its size water project in Wisconsin to reclaim and recycle water, partnering with an adjoining sewerage district, first of its kind in Wisconsin. Benefits of this project are environmental energy impacts and optimized resources that align with EPA's water sustainability considerations, embracing water recycling and stewardship practices. We were recognized by the Wisconsin Sustainable Business Council for the last 9 years. This award emphasizes our dedication to sustainability initiatives and achievements throughout our operations. In 2020, the National Recycling Coalition honored Green Bay Packaging with their Outstanding Business Leadership Award, recognizing contributions to recycling and sustainability. Clearly, we believe in recycling. I think we're bullish on it. I think that's obvious. clearly obvious considering we just made a $500 million commitment to recycling with our new Green Bay mill. In 2018, the decision was made to replace our older mill with a modern state-of-the-art mill. Like the old mill, this new mill would be 100% recycled fiber furnished. In addition to yield, production, and environmental improvements, the new mill would also substantially increase the consumption of recyclable inputs, OCC and mix. Actually, the new mill doubles the usage of these inputs, and down the road, we expect to exceed that. We've been in the OCC market for many years, both in Green Bay and at our Arkansas mill, but not at the consumption level that our new mill will use. About 8 years ago, we upgraded our OCC processing system at our Arkansas mill, and that came with a pretty big increase in OCC usage at that time. Since then, enhancements and tweaks to that system have added an additional 25% to our usage capabilities in Arkansas. From a company standpoint, one of the important components of purchasing fiber is consistency. Consistency meaning not just in where and how much, but consistency in our expectations. It's important that mills not change their strike zone, widening it in times of fiber shortage and tightening it in times of fiber excess. Every mill or company has their own nuances on what they purchase within each particular grade. We're no different, but what we purchase within the grade of OCC should be consistent day to day so that suppliers don't have to keep wondering, is this load going to be accepted or not? And you can see the nuances in what mills use. Going in a recycling plant, you'll see this is a pack for ABC mill and this is a pack for XYZ. But we want our suppliers to know what our expectations are and to be consistent within those guidelines. To address this and to benchmark our suppliers, prior to our mill startup, we conducted 3 bale studies. So last year, we did 2 bale studies in Arkansas and 1 bale study in Green Bay. We would like to have done more in Green Bay, but it was a little busy up there. Our new mill was built on the same site as the old mill and right next to it, and it was extremely restricted. So we did 2 studies in Arkansas and we did 1 in Green Bay. We started last spring in the early stages of the pandemic. Basically, we randomly selected bales off of loads, identifying the supplier on a master sheet with the release number and so on, weighed the bale, and then we broke the bale and pulled out contaminants, separated the contaminants, weighed them individually, and for our study. Now, in the total of in the 3 studies, we did over 500 bales. I personally was involved in 300 of these bale breaks. A word of advice, it's hard work. I hope to do that again. Study in Arkansas Bay, we shared the data with each saw in the number in green with our suppliers, their numbers, what their bales show reflected, and then all averages. The 3rd study was done in Arkansas to prove the credibility of probing bales to discover. We had to assessment. We had high hopes for using a probe. We did the study. The folks that did our bales told us that our bales were very clean and they had trouble finding contaminants. The probe had a good portion of this. It missed. We did not feel that the correlation between what the probe said about a bale was close enough to what the bale break actually found. So we have not pursued using the bale for contaminant assessment. Hasn't the world changed? Recycling also looks different. Maybe it's just parting its hair on the other side, but I think it's a little. I don't know for 20, but you know, when you consider OCC as being collected or had been pretty incredible, a few points. Yes, it's a significant volume, but at a high level. The Green Bay packaging we saw, especially in the early stages, is shutting down recycling operations for periods of time to protect their people. You know, none of us knew what what the rules are on it as called operations tonnage law. We still see operations running at less than full occasionally due to manpower issues. Causes tons to get diverted to local coast sometimes. Some industries, the auto industry for one, are having supply issues with key components, chips, and in some areas, their supporting vendors are significantly affected, having to shut down as well. Volumes of OCC aren't being collected at times because they're not being generated. We've seen changes in our shopping habits. You know, we've all probably cooked more meals at home. Restaurants, you know, their business is down. Online shopping, I mentioned. The decline of brick and mortar stores, big impacts in the generation and collection of OCC, changes in where people work and how people work. I've never seen so many empty offices. The COVID's effect on world populations. You know, you read about what's going on in India, and it would seem that would affect export down the road at some point. Recycling, especially paper recycling in the United States, is a resilient industry. The words adapt, modify, and improve fit this industry well. Every USA entity that is active in recycling has done exactly that, adapted, modified, and improved. We're doing the same at Green Bay Packaging. We've adapted, modified, and improved and continue to do so as we face new challenges. Higher usage volumes that are difficult transportation issues. Difficult transportation, very different transportation issues. We've upped our efforts with our customer recycling process, connecting our inbound and outbound freight logistics and making this multi-divisional within Green Bay Packaging. And we have high hopes for that, and we've seen some progress there in helping us with freight. We anticipate continuing our supplier process. We that our suppliers with will do more mail studies to protect some of our mail people to and provide to give our
Yeah, Dave, you're kind of cutting in and out. You might be a little bit, and we might have lost him. Can you hear me okay? All right. Jen, can you hear me okay? Chaz
Yes.
and Brian?
Yeah,
Okay,
we lost
great.
Dave. Sorry.
Well, hopefully we'll get Dave back on, because I actually had a couple questions I was really anxious to ask him. So I'm hoping he'll be able to log back on, and Jen, maybe you could let me know if I don't see him pop back on. So Brian and Chaz, if you could maybe click your cameras back on and get off mute. We've got some questions, and I'm going to start, I think, with, let's see here, a couple of kind of domestic versus export questions. What would you expect to see? We're still exporting paper. Are there certain types of paper that we're exporting more than others? And why is that? Why are, some seem to be being used here more, and we still have more of that export market? If either of you want to take a stab at that.
Sure, I can start on that. Recovered paper is a globally traded commodity, and it finds its way to where it has its highest value, and that's being used in manufacturing paper and paperboard, whether it's here in the US or in a mill around the world. The two grades of paper that have the greatest amount of exports are corrugated and mixed paper. Corrugated makes up about 60% of US recovered paper exports, mixed paper about 13%. And these are the key grades that go into making packaging papers. Chaz had talked about OCC being used in making container board and liner board. That happens around the world, not just in the US, and the same thing with mixed paper. And as mills get more sophisticated, they are able to use more different kinds of fiber to make products, and that's we're seeing more mixed paper being used in addition to OCC to make packaging papers.
That makes sense. Chaz, anything to add to that?
Yeah, just that, recyclables have historically been exported for decades, metals in particular. And we actually export more for more metals now than we do paper. And it's worth noting that both paper and metals exports are in millions of tons. Plastic exports are in billions of pounds, and you do the comparison, and all of a sudden the real amount of plastic exported really goes down. But not much to add to what Brian said. It's always been essential. It's always been there.
Yeah, that's good. I'm interested in the volume growth of use of cardboard. In fact, when Dave was talking, and I add the numbers of tons that they're consuming at their 2 mills, just to put in context for those of you who don't think this way, it's more tons than many effectively recycling large cities dispose of in the waste stream. That's how many tons those 2 mills are using to make new recycled paper. That's a pretty stunning statistic if you think about it. I know several large West Coast cities generate less waste than what Green Bay is using in their products. So that's a pretty amazing story for the paper industry to be able to tell, quite frankly. So one of the things I was thinking about, Chaz, I think this one's going to be for you. I kind of had this assumption that paper markets would be less volatile as we keep as we send more material to domestic markets. I don't know if that's true or not. I'm kind of curious to see what your crystal ball says about that.
Well, you look at history, you look at recycled newsprint, which was very, very big in the 90s. Customer demand in about, 14, 18 states had laws requiring recycled content newsprint. That did not stabilize markets because you're dealing with commodities, you're dealing with the economy, and not just the domestic economy, but also the international economy. So, everybody loves price stability, but commodities with stable prices over a long period of time are kind of unusual.
Do we expect?
And I think the reality is.
Go ahead. Sorry.
I just add that the reality is recyclables are sort of at the tail end of the commodity markets, partially because of some quality issues and partially simply because of quantity issues. And it makes them, I think, a little more subject to price fluctuations than other commodities. The data is there to show higher fluctuations for recyclables than many other commodities.
That's good. Dave, you're back just in the perfect time. Thank you. I'm sorry we lost you for a minute, but I have questions to ask of you. Can you hear me okay? Dave, you know what? You might want to turn your camera off. It might use less bandwidth if you just keep your camera off, and we can listen to you. One of the questions I was hoping to ask of you is, you mentioned the quality of the material, if you are seeing a change in the quality of your material over time. No, I think he's there. Are you off mute?
Am I here now?
There we go. We can hear you. I think that might work better just to be able to hear you. Sometimes the bandwidth gets stretched with the video. So are you seeing a change in the quality of the material?
We have not seen a
No, maybe not. Maybe that didn't work.
We have not seen a real change in the quality of the OCC.
Okay, that's good.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can. Yep.
We have not seen a change in the quality of the OCC. Since we started our bale studies, we have not seen any change in the quality of OCC. Actually, we saw a change, an upgrade after we started it, and it's kind of stayed at that level since.
Okay, that's good. One of the things you missed, I was noting that the amount of feedstock you use for your product is actually more volume than entire large cities in the United States throw away as waste. So that's amazing. That's really impressive, and kudos to you and what the paper industry is doing to help really divert material and use it in the manufacturing industry to a higher use. So thank you very much. And that it's exciting, that additional volume that you've got is really, really exciting. So thank you. One of the things that I wanted to ask you, probably one of my key questions, if you're seeing a change in the paper industry from a product design perspective, as folks, I think, see the opportunity to try to compete against plastic, to try to create products, manufacture products that might be able to compete with various kinds of plastics in as plastic is under pressure in this day and age. Any of you have any thoughts on that? I was looking online last night, the Johnny Walker bottle is an example of one, the bottle that's going to be made out of 100% fiber. And if that's something, and I wonder too, Brian, if your design guidelines, if there was any relationship between that kind of this new production interest and new products and putting out those design guidelines.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for the question. Consumer products companies are improving their sustainability profiles, and I think paper-based packaging is going to be a big part of that. The industry's got a great recycling story. The recycling rate for paper in 2020 was 65.7%, and it's been at or above 63% every year since 2009. So the foundation is there. We've done a great job in recycling the industry's products, but we know that in order to get to the next frontier where we want to be, we want to improve the recyclability of the industry's products so that we can recycle more of them. And the design guidance is a big piece of that. I think I mentioned earlier in the presentation about the complex decisions that consumer products company packaging designers have to make in terms of balancing performance, cost, reliability, recyclability. And I think the design guidance can help them do that. And by doing that, can help them better meet their sustainability goals in terms of packaging recyclability. And hopefully our industry can recycle more of our products.
I loved one of the fun facts in your guidelines where it said that the industry would run out of, pulp if you weren't, within 6 months, if you didn't have the feedstock, the recycled feedstock. Did I get that right?
Well, yeah, sort of. The industry uses a mix of new fiber and recycled fiber. The utilization rate, I think, for recycled fiber in 2020 was about 42%. Which is a record. The industry is moving way more toward using recycled fiber, but there's got to be a constant infusion of new fiber as well. And that's where that stat came from. If there was no new fiber coming into the system, the paper-based packaging manufacturing industry would run out of fiber in about 6 months.
Incredible. Anything to add to that, Chaz or Dave?
I can say that I think it's clear that you just look at container board production. It's increasing. You look at all this new expansion, this new capacity. The market clearly sees the demand for these cartons, these boxes in particular. So I think definitely a benefit.
Dave, one of the questions that was asked of you when you were talking was, what percentage of your feedstock is mixed paper versus cardboard? Do you use a mixed paper in your feedstock?
In Arkansas, we do not use mixed paper. In Green Bay, with our new mill startup, we'll be doing some trials on that. We plan to get something up in the 20 to 30% range, but we're just going through startup right now and testing the systems out. We haven't really achieved that level yet.
Okay, that's good. Thank you. Kind of my last question, then I think what I'd like to do is kind of have a round robin and give you each a chance if you want to add any final comments about, kind of what you're seeing right now in this, 2021. Just any final comments you might have. But one of my last questions I'd like to ask is about food containers. I'm curious, like, what do they get made into? When I hear this mixed message of being able to recycle them and not being able to recycle them. And I think what I understand is some mills can't, some can. I think that's what I got out of your guidelines. And so I guess my question is, generally, what are those, what is that type of material being manufactured into?
Well, we can look at paper cups. I think they're a great example. For a long time, they were thought to be not recyclable by many folks. Right now, there are 30 mills across the US and Canada that accept poly-coated paper cups for recycling, and that number has grown over the past couple of years. And they typically get made back into paperboard or made into de-ink market pulp. So they get made into white pulp, because it's typically bleached paperboard that goes into other products. So that's typically where that goes.
That makes sense. That's great. Thanks. Great.
Yeah,
Well, let's just, yeah, Dave. Oh,
I was just going to add one thing about the Juneau project, the Oregon mill that's doing food contaminated paper. It's a fascinating project. It's being done by Georgia Pacific, and their goal is to take waste from restaurants, sports stadiums, any place, schools, universities. Take that material. They've got a system they designed that involves heat and pressure and filtration. And the idea is to capture the fiber and then add that fiber to OCC to make linerboard. They have opened the facility. They're contracting now with haulers to supply the product. It'd be fascinating to see how that works out.
yeah,
And
I
if it's
agree.
successful, it's going to be a major breakthrough in the ability of those papers.
Yeah, we've watched that as well. We're very interested as well. Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. Dave, we had a request when you cut out when you were talking about your bale breaking. Could you describe what you found when you looked at those 500 bales? It sounded really interesting, but we couldn't get it all.
Well, we weighed the bale, painted a number on it, then broke the bale. We go through it, and it takes about an hour to do a complete assessment on it. So, there's a lot of investment in time. So we pulled out film, we pulled out polystyrene, we pulled out any wood or, poly bags, anything that, anything that contaminate,
Oh, you're kind of cutting out again. You might need to get
out. Found positives. You have prohibited.
Yeah. Okay, I think you're cutting out. You're kind of cutting in and out again, Dave. You might need to get closer to the microphone if you can.
Okay. I'm not sure if that's my connection or what. I apologize.
That's okay. It's so interesting though.
In Arkansas, we found more wax contamination. I think we have more grocery store bales.
Okay.
And hence the leads to that. In Green Bay, we had more film contamination, but we have more MRF type tonnage in Green Bay, and so it kind of makes sense. That was one of the big things I noticed was that and one thing food packaging and one of the things about food into.
Oh, sorry, we're losing you again, Dave. You there? Hey, Dave, I think
when you order pizza that's made and you're a pizza, the pizza. If the box is really clean, you don't leave food contamination in it, we can use those boxes.
Yeah, that's good.
Am I
That's
there
good.
now or not?
I think one of the takeaways I get from that is the feedstock and kind of the different categories of customers you're getting material from. And I think what we're going to do, because we are really interested in some of this detail, is if we could, we'll follow up with you. And since we're having some audio problems, maybe we can, I can talk on the phone. We can get some information on the phone from you, because I think folks are really interested in particularly in the study that you've done. So if you're willing to do that, that'd be great. Maybe what we could do is just really briefly do a really quick round robin. I think we were trying to save audio. I think Brian and Chaz, if you are still there and want to click back on with your audio and your camera, we'll just do a quick round robin. And Brian, if you want to just a minute, any last final comments you want to offer?
Sure, thanks, Susan. The paper industry's made tremendous progress in recycling over the last 30 years. And a lot of that is the result of working across the industry and with other stakeholders in collaborative efforts. The design guidance is certainly a great example of that. A lot of the input that we got in that project was from packaging designers, was from the folks who make those additives and non-fiber elements that attach or apply to packaging, so that we made something that was useful for everybody. That's going to help improve recyclability and help the industry recycle more of our products. Picking up on Dave's comment about pizza boxes, that's another great example of collaborative work that we did with other stakeholders. We reached out to our members to ask how many of the mills accept pizza boxes for recycling. What we found was that the vast majority do. 93.6% of all of the OCC that's consumed by our member mills are consumed by mills that accept pizza boxes for recyclability. So we had a couple of members do some more research to drill down to address issues like contamination. What about grease and cheese? Does that matter? Turns out that it doesn't if they are in the concentration, the amounts that are typically found in boxes. And then we've worked with other stakeholders to educate consumers and municipalities about pizza boxes, that they are recyclable, that the industry does want them to make new products, and hopefully get municipalities who may not be accepting pizza boxes in their recycling programs now to start adding them. And that will enable us to get more fiber into the system, and that's a win for everybody.
That's great. Thank you for that. And it's a reminder. I actually had a question about 3 months ago about pizza boxes again. And I think it's going to take a while to get that word out consistently everywhere, but it is something that definitely we're working to try to get that consistent message. So thank you, Brian. Chaz, let's end with you. And we're going to follow up. I'm going to follow up with Dave in a different form, because I'm really anxious to do that. But Chaz, could we just wrap up with you?
Sure. First of all, my thanks to SERDC and the sponsors for doing this webinar. I've had great fun participating. And to be honest, it's more fun now talking about markets when things are looking up, as opposed to the depressing markets of the last couple of years. We have good things to say instead of bad, but people just need to remember markets come, they go up, they go down. You always have to emphasize quality in your programs, because that's what markets want. They want raw materials.
Great. Thanks for ending on that. Perfect note. Appreciate it. Thanks to SERDC. Thank you, Chaz. Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Dave. Appreciate all of you being on this today. Have a great rest of your week, and join us in July. We will have a plastic market update as well. We've got great speakers lined up for that, so we hope to see folks back for that. Thank you again. I appreciate it to you, panelists. Thanks.